Today we're looking into events, random numbers, and buttons. We talked about events previously sort of in the abstract as a type of delegate, but now I want to talk about events as they actually relate to controls on a C# program and are implemented through the IDE. To illustrate this, first we need to create a new project. Select Windows Forms Application and call it button 01. Let's expand the form out. In fact, maybe I'll move this over a bit. And to add a button, there's a number of different panes on the IDE. There's the toolbox on the left, the Solutions Explorer on the right, and also the Properties windows on the right. And the first thing we want to do is add a button, and we can either do that by double clicking on button or clicking on it and holding down the left mouse pointer and dragging it over to the pane, or dragging it over to the form. Once a control's on the form and selected, the Properties pane describes all the different attributes of the control. For instance, the name, which you want to change to BTN the button, so that it becomes clear what we're accessing when we look at the code behind the form. And the font is always too small for me, so I'm going to increase it to 14 pixels. Leave it to Microsoft Sans Serif family. And finally, we want to change the text that's inside the button. Right now it's just the default value of button 1. And let's change this to say press this button to win $1 million. Of course, that's all way too big to fit in the original button, so we'll need to stretch this out so we can see everything in it. And now we come to the events portion of the concept. And basically the IDE is an interactive type of programming. It simply creates a program that waits for the user to do something and then reacts to what the user does. And what the user does is referred to as an event. And so any given control has a number of events associated with it. If we look at these top buttons on the Properties pane, this is categorized, which basically sorts things by category and then alphabetical within category. And this is alphabetical, which just sorts everything in pure alphabetical order. And that's the way I prefer it. I can find things if they're totally in alphabetical order. But then what is actually displayed in the pane is selected by these two buttons. The first one is the Properties, and the second one is Events. So all the possible events associated with this button are categorized in this event list. But to go back to Properties and to go back to our control, if we just double click on it, we'll get the default event, which is the click event for a button. So when I double click, I immediately go into the code, and it says private void btn the button underscore click, which says what event is being evoked. And then we have a couple arguments. One is the sender, in other words, who's calling the control, and the other is event args, which is a description of all the information that gets passed to the control, which varies depending on what the event actually is. We've seen how we can change attributes of the control. with the properties pane. But now another important concept we need to understand is we can also change these properties programmatically by selecting the control, a dot operator, and the attribute we want to change. So if we put in the code btn the button dot text equals you win, when this button is pressed, the text inside the button will change to you win, and a message box will pop up that says congratulations, you're a millionaire. So if we save this and then compile and run it, if we push this button, it changes to you win, and it says congratulations, you are a millionaire in the message box. But that's pretty boring. Who wants to always get $1 million every time you press the button? So to make it more interesting, we have to look at some of the other events that are associated with a button rather than just a default click event. So we click on the events and go down to mouse hover. Double click on that and you see we get another event, which is the btn the button underscore mouse hover with the same type of parameters. But before we write the code for this event, we need to set up the environment that the code runs in, and the best place to do that is the form load event that always occurs when the form loads. So if we click on the form, it'll select it, and you'll see the form properties are here and so on. And we can go down and change the text that's in the title bar. Oh, we're in the event still. Go down and change the text that's in the title bar to something like when $1 million. And you'll notice that in the form that changes in the title bar. And now if we double click on the form's title bar, we'll go to the default event handler for the form, which is the load event. And we need to create several global variables, which is two ints, max x and max y, and then a variable called random that's of the random class. And the random class essentially allows you to generate random numbers based on an old algorithm. And then the code we put in the form load initializes these variables. It looks at the button first of all, and characteristics of the button, namely the size. Size is a structure that has two attributes, width and height. And so if we say btn the button dot size dot width equals a local variable called button width, and btn the button dot size dot height equals a local variable called button height. And then we use this to refer to the form itself. This is a key word that actually varies in meaning depending on the context, but when you're within a form, it always refers to the form. And we say this dot size dot width minus button width minus 30 equals the maximum x, which is the maximum x position that we want the mouse pointer to be at when we do what we're about to do. And do the same thing for y with this dot size dot height and button height, and just a fudge factor of 30 to make sure we don't go too far. And then we initialize the initial set of random values we can get by saying random equals new random, which instantiates an object of the class random, which allows us to get random numbers with the dot next method. Then to get back to the hover event handler, we basically create yet another random variable that's one entirely local. Random local random equals new random, and then we get two random values with the random dot next of the global random variable, and these can range from 0 to actually max x minus 1 because this is non-inclusive. So we're basically getting screen coordinates that fit within the form and fit within where the mouse pointer could be. And we do the same thing for the y coordinate on the form with a random dot next 0 max y. And then we create a new random point with the point class, new point, and the random x and random y values. Point, like size, has two values, an x value and a y value, although in terms of size it's the size, and in terms of point it's the location. And then we change another attribute of the button, which is location, which is where it's located on the page, and we set that equal to random point. And then we set an integer that's the local random variable that's between 0 and actually 3 minus 1, so it can be 0, 1, or 2. And we initially set a string of message to try again, but then we do a switch that on the random message selector we just generated, and we say if it's 0, make the message try again. If it's 1, make it almost got it. If it's 2, make it bad luck. And if it's default, it says butter clicker. But it should never get to default because these are the only three values that should be able to be generated from this random number generator. And then finally we set the button.text again to this random text we've generated. So if we compile and run this, and then we try and click this button, whoop, it jumped away. When I move over it again, it jumps away and it randomly changes what's in it. Oh, now it's making very small jumps. Oh, there, it made a big jump. And ironically, the way you can win the game is you saw the small jumps it was making previously. If it makes a small jump where it's still under the mouse pointer, you actually can win the game and win the $1 million. But generally the button's going to jump away from you, so you can't. If I try and click it, missed it, missed it, missed it, missed it, missed it, whoop, missed it, missed it. Well, you might have to take my word for it that you can win. Well, I hope you enjoyed this lesson and learned a lot, and don't forget to subscribe.